What's something outside of palindromes that you would say you know backwards and forwards?
I don't want to say I have any real expertise in bookselling, but I've been a bookseller for a long time.
Is it ever like a specific kind of books, like a rare bookseller or of a particular ilk?
No, I've been a general bookseller, but I now work at the MIT Press bookstore, and I worked for many years at the Harvard University Press display room. So academic books, I have spent a lot of time with. I don't want to say I know too much about them.
You know them forwards, at least.
I know them in one direction.
Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. Every week on Butter No Parsnips, your hosts Emily Moyers and Kyle Imperator take you on an adventure through the weird, wacky, wonderful, and sometimes even wicked world of one wayside word. Strange characters, delightful bits, and general joyousness abound. Join them as they test each other's etymological expertise.
Hey everybody, welcome to Butter No Parsnips. I'm Kyle Imperator.
And I'm Emily Moyers.
Emily, I have a word for you today. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Kyle.
Now, you've heard this word before. You definitely know what this word means. Because, Emily, today your word is palindrome. Palindrome. Palindrome.
I mean, I definitely do know this word.
Emily, wait. Because I have something else for you today as well.
Okay.
Yes, Emily, because with your word today, I also have a guest who specializes in that word.
Well, that makes things easier for me.
Yes, it does. Emily, audience at home, please welcome Barry Duncan to our show. Hi, Barry. How's it going?
Fine, Kyle. Thank you. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
Barry, it's wonderful to have you on. Can you let the people at home know a little more about yourself and about what palindromes are?
Sure. Well, I'm Barry Duncan. I write palindromes. A palindrome, of course, is any sequence of letters or words or symbols that reads the same forward as backward. I write palindromes at a pretty high level, which is why I am known as the master palindromist. I might point out that in that last sentence, the word level itself is a very elegant, natural palindrome. If you are only familiar with small, straining, clunky, nonsensical palindromes, then what I write might take some getting used to. But the fundamental principle is the same. I write in two directions.
It is truly fascinating and incomprehensible, speaking as someone who only reads in one direction. But hey, before we get into the craft of palindromes, I think it is only right for us to give the audience a little bit of etymology.
So, to talk a little bit about palindromes, the word palindrome comes from the ancient Greek palindromos, meaning running back again, from the roots palin, meaning back and again, and dromos, meaning running.
And the concept goes back even further in recorded history to at least the 1st century with what's called the sator square. Are you familiar with the sator square, Barry?
Yes. It's very beautiful, I think.
For those of you at home, the sator square is a square of 5 rows of 5-letter Latin words. So it's sator, arepo, tenet, opera, and rotas. And it reads the same across and vertically, and any old way you read it, it's kind of like a tightly packed acrostic. Do you have any personal thoughts about it?
Not really, but I remember that I was writing palindromes, it seemed, for a while before I saw it. And I was very pleased to see it. I mean, I know people have been writing palindromes for thousands of years, but that is a really wonderful.
Possibly the earliest English language palindrome is all thanks to the 17th century Englishman and poet John Taylor, who in 1614 wrote a line, quote, "the same backward as it is forward." And he offered to give, quote, "any man 5 shillings apiece for as many as they can make in English."
Taylor's bet-worthy line, Lewd did I live, and evil I did dwell.
Which is delightful.
It's perfect.
Does it have an ampersand in the middle? Is that?
It must, because otherwise it wouldn't be palindromic if it had "and" written out. Dwell is one L, just to make it
Right.
with lewd. Yeah. Today, though, you might be more familiar with palindromes in the forms of individual words like race car or kayak, that man, a plan, a canal, Panama, that's the one I've heard. Dates like January 1st, 2010, or even music that reads the same backwards as forwards.
But before we move on, I want to thank you, Barry, for sending along all the samples of your work. It's truly marvelous writing that you're doing. Would you mind perhaps reading a selection for us and our audience?
I will. Thank you. I'm going to start by reading a Thanksgiving palindrome that I wrote in 2019. I don't remember exactly how it came about, since I'm often in a kind of fever when I write, but I had decided I would write a Thanksgiving palindrome from the perspective of a turkey. And then somehow that turned into giving alternate lines to the turkey and a human. So that is the way that this is set up. And I just want to say I will try to do two voices. The higher voice is that of the turkey, and that will be the first line, and then alternating turkey, human, turkey, human. So this from 2019 is called Thanksgiving, Turkey and Human. War? Ah, axes. I host. Left in a metal pan. Ow. As I till, laden, rub mayo, not. One had assets, a brood. No parts of feud. Erased. Is, hey, Lima family, eh? Sides are due, fast. Rap on door, bastes. Sad, a hen. Oh, to no yam burned, all lit. I saw on a plate, man, it felt so, his ex, aha, raw.
So delightful.
Truly fantastic. And just how you studded all of those delicious Thanksgiving-y words, turkey words in there. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
So you have this great piece that you wrote for the MIT Technology Review where you get into the details of what palindroming means to you and how you approach it. But I'd love to be able to unpack some of that here with you now. First of all, you make a great distinction in the piece about the difference between a good palindrome and a bad one. And I feel like it made me realize that I do have like genuine feelings about this. We've all run into that palindrome that's really stretching some word use, acronyms, or unconventional spellings, and it's just not nearly as satisfying. Could you get into that with us?
Well, I believe I say most people are familiar with only two kinds of palindromes, bad and worse. And I think most of the time, people are not making an attempt to try to write something that sounds like normal speech. There's no attempt to replicate conversational syntax. They're writing nonsense or gibberish, stringing random words together, and then maybe assigning some meaning after the fact. And my process is completely the opposite of that, in that I'm always writing about a particular subject, either a subject that I've chosen or one that I've been asked to write about. When you start writing palindromes, really the best way to learn is by stringing random words together and looking for reversible patterns everywhere. So the beginner can be forgiven. I do think that a lot of people write that kind of palindrome, and a lot of people only know that kind of palindrome. So I always say that I'm trying to establish palindrome writing as a literary form, and I think people laugh at that because they haven't seen anything that leads them to believe that could happen.
When you talk about stringing words together as practice, you sort of almost make it sound like a musician doing scales. Do you feel like there's core skills that you build that help you like sort of work on that higher level?
That's a great analogy. For a long time, I was just reversing everything. Every word I heard, every word I saw, every word I read, every word I wrote. And you just get to know combinations that way and patterns. And that is true. It is a lot like practicing your scales. When I talk to writing classes about palindrome writing, I say palindrome writing is like any kind of writing that requires a long apprenticeship. First, you learn how to build the machinery. Next, you learn how to operate the machinery. And if you're fortunate enough to get that far, you learn how to hide the machinery.
That's a great analogy, too.
Yeah, that is a great analogy. You said that you start palindromes at the middle. Does that mean that you start with like a relevant word or a relevant set of words that you know to be reversible? Is that something that you've built over the years, like a sort of mental arsenal of readily reversible words?
Usually when I read a news story or somebody's talking about some subject, or I see a word that can be reversed, and I think that will be my middle. Sometimes it doesn't end up being the middle, and sometimes you can overcommit to the middle and not see when a better one comes along. But usually there'll be something I latch onto like that. It's usually a new word. It's usually a word I haven't used before, and that's the appeal of it. When I'm writing palindromes, I always, at the end, go through and check my NWP, my new word percentage, because I always hope it's at least 10%, and that I'm not falling back on old patterns and combinations when I write, but I'm actually serving the subject with pertinent vocabulary. But I do have a toolkit of words and combinations and patterns. And I think we're talking here about the difference between when I write something at a leisurely pace and if I have to write an instant palindrome. So let's say, for example, you came to me and said, I have friends. In 2 months, they're celebrating their 4th wedding anniversary. Here's a lot of biographical information about them. Could you write a palindrome for them? And if we're being realistic here, you would probably also say at some point, is there a way I can pay you no money for creating a work of art that is literally without precedent in human history? And I would say something like, yes, I think we can arrange that. But anyway, so then I've got 2 months to produce this palindrome, and I've got information you've given me, and I'm probably calling you up and asking you for more information. Do you know the names of the streets they grew up on? Well, do they have pet names for one another? All these different things, and looking for vocabulary that's reversible, looking for facts that will fit in. And then I work very quickly anyway, but so when I say leisurely, I don't really mean leisurely because I'm usually on fire. But then I'm really doing a lot of groundwork. I'm evaluating clustering options. I'm sizing up vocabulary. I'm establishing tonal foundations. I've got a lot of time. But if you're sitting across from me at a table and you want this anniversary palindrome now. Then it's a different situation. Then everything comes down to pattern recognition. And then I will dip into my toolkit of combinations that I know will help me and get me out of a tight spot. And then the result, of course, won't be as layered or complex or nuanced as it might be if I had more time. But because my pattern recognition is fairly good, it usually turns out okay. But I have so many words and combinations that I'll use again and again. And as I say, when I'm working on something, I'm trying not to fall back on those things, but there have to be some words that you rely on like that.
So the opposite of the instant palindrome, you've written out what you term mega palindromes. And these are palindromes that are hundreds of words long, longer than most college essay word count requirements. How does embarking on that length differ from the shorter Thanksgiving palindrome?
First of all, I want to say I never write a mega palindrome, which is 1,000 or more characters, just for the sake of writing. Because if I wanted to do that, I would just string out words all day long. But when I'm writing a palindrome of normal length, I'm usually lying on my couch holding a legal pad. When I'm writing one of these sprawling, chaotic palindromes, I'm sitting on my couch, and on the coffee table in front of me is maybe 6 or 7 legal pads that all have different sections. So I would say the main difference is that I'm working in sections, and it's a lot less satisfying than being able to see everything on one page. And in this case, you think, oh, I got that section. Now I'll put that with the other sections. And so I think the process is very much the same. It's just on a much bigger scale.
So I just want to clarify quickly, when you talk about working in sections, am I right in thinking they would need to be bookended sections? Like you'd need to be working on parts on either side of the turn at all times?
Right. Unless I'm working on the actual middle section, which would be palindromic in itself. I'm working at 1 and 5 and 2 and 4 and 3 is the middle, say.
Wow.
Yeah, it's difficult. And I think looking back, I think I used to do more of that. And I don't like to say this about myself, but some of it may have just been showing off.
Listen, when you're good at something, you got to show off every once in a while.
Every now and then, I suppose.
Many of your palindromes, I would say all of the ones that I've read, they read like poetry. You mentioned that you consider it a form of literature. Do you see parallels with poetry in palindroming?
So I do think that some palindromes are poetic or lyrical. I hesitate to say that I'm creating poetry. I think it sounds sort of pretentious or like I'm bragging. And also I'm in the danger of insulting people who are real poets. At the same time, however, I am pleased that people who know a good deal more about poetry than I do have likened my work to poetry. And whenever the MIT Daily publishes something of mine, they usually identify me as palindrome poet Barry Duncan. So I don't want to say it for myself, but I'm awfully flattered when people say it about me.
I think part of the reason they look like poems when you look at them is there are lines and sometimes, like in the Thanksgiving one, there are dialogue lines, but sometimes they do read like poetry lines. And I'm just curious what prompts you to hit new line in the places that you do in some of your palindromes.
When I'm beginning work on a palindrome, one of the questions I'm always asking is this going to be a single palindrome or is this going to be a series of palindromes? And let's say I say, well, this will be a single palindrome. I see some words down here that I can reverse up there, and I think I can make a logical single palindrome. Then it's always a question of how I'm going to break up lines or divide it into paragraphs or make it all one paragraph. It's always a question. And I second guess myself a lot on that because I'll think, but sometimes it's easy, like if it's the end of a sentence and then there'll be a natural break. But sometimes it's not that easy. And of course, it also depends on how long something is. A lot of palindromes I write, as soon as I see the middle, I see the whole palindrome. And so then it's just like I'm writing a line. And with longer ones, though, there's this question of presentation, how they look on the page is important.
Yeah, there are some palindromes you've written like completely void of punctuation, right?
My PIY palindromes, punctuate it yourself, yes. And that's just a bit more impressionistic, and I leave it to the reader to do some work and to make combinations.
So one of the things that dawned on us while preparing this episode is that there's a sort of constrained writing form that's imposed upon palindrome writing. That is, that the piece that you're writing is constrained by the rule to be able to read the same way backwards and forwards, right? There are a lot of implications to that rule, but talk to us about the role of constraints in writing palindromes.
Well, if we get back to the idea of poetry, I think in palindrome writing, the constraint of reversibility is perhaps as limiting or as liberating as working with a strict meter or rhyme scheme. When I first started writing palindromes, I constantly despaired and I thought, I'll never put three sensible words together with. It's like I'm in a straitjacket with this oppressive form. But now those same parameters are part of the inspiration.
I have often found that when I write whatever format I'm writing in, the more like boxes I put around myself, the more the faster I get something written.
Yeah, I feel the same when I'm writing music too.
Oh,
Sometimes it's like, all right, well, I could write like it's a blank page, anything could be here. But once you start giving yourself those constraints, there's more creativity. Barry,
have you experimented with like other forms of writing and like palindrome is the one that stuck, or has it just always been palindromes?
No, I'll say this. I always fancied myself a writer of some kind and wrote a lot of different things, song lyrics, plays, a novel, poetry, whatever. But when I finally felt as if I found my voice with palindrome writing, it was long after I had been introduced to it initially. I mean, it didn't take hold of me early. I just kept doing it and kept noticing things. And it was only like back in, I don't even know when, 2009, 2010, I started to really see that this was a way I could really express myself. And in fact, I was recently talking to a friend of mine who writes screenplays and is currently working on a series of short stories. And I was saying, when you write different things and you get an idea, what is the optimal form for the presentation of that idea? Is that idea a story, or would it be better as a song lyric, or would it be better as an essay? Or maybe it's just insubstantial and would only be adequate as the punchline of a joke. And for me, there's never any hesitation. I get an idea, I write a palindrome.
Well, Barry, While I did love the delightful seasonal poem that you read earlier, I think we'd be denying the audience a lot if we denied them the opportunity to hear your more topical palindromes. In particular, one you titled Palindrome from a Birmingham Hospital. Would you mind reading that one for us?
So this was a palindrome I wrote in October of 2012, and I wrote it about Malala after she had been shot. And she was in a hospital in Birmingham, England, and I had just talked to my friend Paul Howe, and he was teaching English at that time, and he told me he had just taught Dr. King's Letter from Birmingham Jail, and that's where the title came from. So, Palindrome from a Birmingham Hospital. Now one, vile, lame, fired. No. Wrong is astir. A fate Malala met afar. It's a sign or wonder. I, female, live. No. One.
A very powerful. Yeah. So the Malala that you wrote about is, of course, Malala Yousafzai. And, this was after the attempt on her life back in 2012, you mentioned. Talk to us about meeting that moment with a palindrome.
There were two things that provided the immediate inspiration. One was on an emotional level, my reaction to the shooting, and I was determined to write something about it and for Malala. And I guess just about simultaneously, the technical inspiration was I realized that having the name Malala in the middle of a palindrome provided me with a practically invisible middle. But I have to point out, there was no indication that I would have been able to compose a palindrome that had such emotional depth. I mean, before that, I had certainly written factual palindromes or recounted events in two directions, whatever, but nothing like this. I always speak of it as a breakthrough, technically, emotionally, stylistically. It's the palindrome that's on my business card, and I've always been very proud of it.
Do you feel like it stands out, even with the palindromes that you've written since then? Are there any that hit that emotional level, or is this one kind of like a standout moment?
I think I've written some emotional palindromes. I have several palindromes that have moved people to tears, but this one is very special. It observes what I call the classical symmetries, in that the longest word in it, Malala, is 6 letters. And there are also 5-letter words, 4-letter words, 3-letter words, 2-letter words, and 1-letter word. I always say I'm unlikely to get so close to perfection again. It's just, it was the right length. It was the right subject, and this really signaled something, that I could do something in two directions. It might have been just a fluke, and I might have never approached that again, but it seemed to be a sign of things to come, maybe. I don't know.
Is there something about the reversibility of the form of palindromes, the idea that you're starting in one place and ending where you began, that kind of mirroring effect that plays into the meaning of the palindromes that you write? Or is it just the form of palindromes is what you've chosen to write in?
I always think that one sign of a good palindrome is that it's very balanced. And of course, a palindrome is necessarily going to be balanced because it's the same forward as backward. But sometimes I'll get to the middle, and all of the really important or profound things I'm saying are in the second half, or the opposite of that. So I think there's something about this idea of reversibility that's constantly challenging and to always be trying to write something that's very balanced and evenly distributed. But I do think it's the form. It's what I'm going to work in. So if I'm writing something that's eloquent or I'm committing a great reversible blunder, I mean, both ways, I'm going to be using the form that I know.
Speaking of using that form, you mentioned finding the Almanac of Words at Play by Willard R. Espy as your first real foray into palindromes. You bring up the idea of reversibility almost as this kind of Zen practice, but I'm curious about what it is that really attracted you to palindroming. What about this particular constraint versus something like only using the vowel E in a piece or only writing in sentences that utilize the entire alphabet? What about reversibility just made the most sense to you?
I remember thinking it was very beautiful to look at visually. It was very beautiful. But I think one thing that appealed to me on a deep level, I think, and I say this not to make fun of myself or anything, but I have very little command of logic or linear thought. And somehow this form, which was circular and self-contained and self-referential, I think resonated with me somewhere very deep down. And I think that when I first saw it, I thought it was very attractive. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I could do that. And it was years and years. I mean, I was probably introduced to it in 81 when I saw the Espy book. And it wasn't until many years later that I saw it as the form that I really wanted to work in and where I really found my voice.
I was thinking, you talked about how it struck you as being visually striking, palindromes. And I was thinking this earlier when you were reading them aloud. Does that feel does it feel like visual is the intended medium of palindromes? Do you feel like they lose something being read aloud?
I think that perhaps it's the idea of reading them and hearing the same vowel sounds on both sides, I think that's the whole point of when I'm writing and I'm trying to work in a sort of tonal way where I can. I think sometimes, though, I don't know, some of them might not sound so good aloud. I'll often read them to myself after I finish writing them, and I'll think, this one looks better, but this one sounds better. But I think the idea of the vowel sounds is really important and really kind of casts a spell. And also, I sometimes tell people when they want to reproduce or publish one of my palindromes that they don't have to say it's a palindrome and they don't have to identify me as the author, because I think it's very interesting just what happens when you read something reversible, even if you don't know that it's reversible.
Sure. That's what I would never have even considered telling people that it wasn't a palindrome if I were writing palindromes. What was your thought process there?
For example, the Malala palindrome. If somebody reproduced that without the title, it would be pretty difficult to see that that was a palindrome. And I think it's fascinating to think that people would read it, not realize what it was, but on some level in the brain, they would have to know.
Yeah, going back to the idea of palindroming becoming second nature after practicing for so long, in what ways has this craft impacted the way that you interact with language, both written and spoken?
I think that I'm probably always looking for reversible patterns and reversible phrases jump out at me when people are speaking or when I'm reading. One thing that occurs to me is that I think I've become less tolerant of long prose passages because I think on some level I'm thinking this should have pivoted and turned already.
I love that little insight into palindromist's brain.
They're always waiting for the midpoint.
Yeah. Do you feel that writing palindromes exercises some abilities beyond words and language? Like, do you find yourself approaching people or conflicts or work differently as a result of your lens of reversibility?
I don't know that I do. I may. I think specializing in this type of writing has probably loosened even more my very tenuous grip on logic and my imperfect understanding of the way things work in the linear world. I'm hopeless at this point, I think.
I think some of your writing might be helping others perceive the world a little bit better. So there's hope. There's hope.
We all want to loosen our grip on logic. I feel like my grip is too tight. So this is perfect for me.
All right, Barry, I have one last big question that I want to ask you before we move on to our game. What's one thing that you'd like our audience to take away from this episode, whether it's about palindromes, reversibility, or even something bigger than that?
I would say I would like your audience to consider that palindromes are perhaps more serious than they think and can be more eloquent and can be factual and humorous and can have real literary merit. But I would also like to say that though I don't want to paint myself as a victim, over the years, people I know have been very dismissive of the palindromes. And I think I would want people to know that whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. Don't listen to anyone else. Even people who have your best interests in mind don't necessarily know what you should be doing. So if you have something different that you're doing, keep doing it. See where it leads.
I love that, Barry. What a good end note to leave everybody with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Barry, for this fantastic interview. Are you interested in playing a little game with us?
I certainly am.
So, palindromes have never really found themselves in the spotlight of a Butter No Parsnips episode. We've talked about constraints similar to palindroming in our 22nd episode, Ulipo, but we got much closer with episode 14, Anagrams, when we talked about anadromes. These are words that, when spelled backwards, wind up spelling a different word as opposed to the same word. Barry, I feel like anadromes must be important to palindrome construction. Am I right to say so?
Yes, I would say that. I'm always thinking about words that will reverse. I'm not necessarily thinking about complete words. I'm usually thinking this has alternating vowels and consonants. This will do well. I'm not thinking about that so much.
Sure. Some common examples of anadromes include spots and stops, desserts and stressed, or name tag and gateman. But sometimes anadromes are contrived from words as a naming convention for new concepts, artistic work, scientific ideas. These contrived anadromes will often nudge at the notion of reversibility or highlight a relationship between the anadrome and the original word. For instance, there's an asteroid called Dioretsa, which is a reversal of the word asteroid because the asteroid itself has a retrograde orbit.
Oh, I see, yes.
So in this game, which we're calling Do Anadromes Dream of Kurtkela Sheep, I'm going to give you a word and 3 choices, and then together, cooperatively, you guys will flip that word and then tell me which option you think is the correct meaning. Are you ready?
I hope I'm ready.
this.
I've got a pen and paper ready so I can write the word down because I feel like I will never be able to reverse it otherwise.
So your first word is Beatles, Beatles, as in the band. Your options for what this anadrome is it the Beatles merchandising company? Is it a ska genre Beatles tribute band? Or is it a European beetle species belonging to the genus Sphinx?
I don't know, Barry, are you having any initial thoughts?
Yes, I'm going with the Beatle, the third choice.
Oh, yeah? See, I was thinking the ska band because that feels the most antithetical to Beatles. But I will go with you because also I've written out Beatles in reverse and it looks crazy and it feels like it can only be a scientific name of a bug.
Do you want to read that aloud for the audience, the anadrome?
I've got Celtabe.
Celtabe, yeah. I mean, Celta Ebb.
Ooh, Celta Ebb. That's a good pronunciation of that. I like that. No, actually, the answer is it's the Beatles merchandising company.
Crazy.
That is crazy.
I guess their agent was like, this is the best I got.
Fire that guy.
Fire that guy. But that was a great guess. I mean, that was like the most scholarly guess, you know? Okay, your next clue is gray, Gray.
Yarg.
Yeah, yarg. So is yarg a Pantone color named for its inventor, David Gray? A slang term used by early neurologists to describe unstudied parts of the brain? Or is it a cheese rediscovered by Alan and Jenny Gray, as in Cornish yarg?
Oh, wow.
Gosh, all the possibilities sound really possible.
You looked as disgusted by the cheese as I felt.
What are you leaning toward?
I feel like the brain cells one, because it's like gray matter, but it's the parts we haven't seen yet. I don't know.
I'll go with you on that. All of them sound good to me.
You guys don't think that you'd wear a Pantone color yarg? My yarg sweater?
Can't see myself buying that at the department store.
They'd really have to do a number in the advertising to get someone to buy that. You know, I'm afraid you guys picked the scholarly answer again, and it was the fluke. It was the red herring, the yarg herring.
What was the answer?
The answer is a cheese rediscovered by Alan and Jenny Gray. Cornish yarg.
I'm upset.
Your reactions make me say that you guys wouldn't eat any Cornish yarg.
I might now.
Okay, your last clue is Cinderella. Cinderella.
Al Rednick?
That's what I've got.
So your clues, your possible choices here are a 1963 stage parody of Cinderella, whereby a stepmother is tormented by her wicked stepdaughter. A term for a riches to rags story used to describe high-achieving women whose careers stall after marriage. Or the name of a scam that requires a high buy-in with promised losses of 100% or more, or what you might call the victim of that scam.
Oh, those all make sense, is the problem.
I have to say, I don't recall any play with that name. I guess there could have been.
I don't know. Barry, are any jumping out to you as good options?
No, I just think this is a great game. Well, I could play this. Oh, too bad I spent so long talking about palindromes.
Yeah, Kyle had 80 more questions planned, and he had to cut them all.
I'm leaning toward the second one.
I think I am too.
I think you guys made a great choice this time. This time, the scholarly answer was the correct one.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, it's been referenced in some scholarly articles and some studies.
Ella Rednick. And that was, remind me the details of that one?
A term for a riches to rags story used to describe high-achieving women whose careers stall after marriage.
That's an Alla Rednick story.
An Alla Rednick, yeah. Well, Barry, thank you so much for joining us on the show and for talking about all of this palindromic fun with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
As have we. This has been truly a remarkable conversation, one that I think both Emily and I, based on our literary and musical artistic backgrounds, are really getting a lot of fun out of. Meet.
I'll be honest, when we first started talking about this episode, I thought, how much depth is there to plumb in palindromes? But I quickly realized there is so much, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Barry, can you let our audience know what you're up to and where they can find you?
Well, I recently completed my first epic palindrome of 2025. That was written for the Harvard Square stationery store Bob Slate, an epic palindrome being a palindrome of 100 or more words. And I followed that with a 49 palindrome series about the short story collection, The School of Anecdotal Medicine by Jacob Appel. If people want to commission palindromes, or if they want me to talk to a school group or anything, they can always drop me a line. My email is palindromist@hotmail.com. If you want to tell me that my palindromes are gibberish, I probably won't reply. If you want to say you heard me on the Butter No Parsnips podcast and I thought you were an eccentric clown, I probably will reply. I should also mention that the filmmaker, Michael Rossi, is currently editing his documentary film about me, The Master Palindromist. And if anyone would like to know how I came to write palindromes and how I came to be the way I am, you might want to check out that column I wrote for the 125th anniversary issue of the MIT Alumni Magazine Technology Review.
Yeah, it's a great article. Yeah.
Thank you again, Barry, and for everyone out there for listening. Remember, you can find Butter No Parsnips on social media, on Facebook and Instagram at Butter No Parsnips Podcast, and on TikTok at Butter No Parsnips. And if you like today's episode, consider giving us a 5-star rating or review wherever you heard us.
And if you really like today's episode, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/butternoparsnips. Donating $5 or more earns you a shout out, either on social media or here on the podcast.
Thanks so much to all of you. You help us make what we make.
And with that, I've been Kyle Imperator.
And I've been Emily Moyers, and you've been...
I've been Barry Duncan.
And this has been Butter No Parsnips.
Fine words, spins, rap on, do pastime, gab a lot. No, sit. Seth G is one. K-I-E-M. Still, it's me. I know, sigh. Test is on. To lab. A gem. It's a pod. No parsnips.
I love that so much.
Yeah, it's so good.
Thank you so much for writing that for us.
Butter No Parsnips is produced by Seth Glicksman, Emily Moyers, and myself, Kyle Imperator. The main and accompanying themes are composed by Kyle Imperator.